company called Panther Sim. We're a sponsor here, doing field CISO work. So right now I kind of work a lot with SIM and writing detections and things like that. But in a prior life, I was actually building various tools to sort of track criminals, and I'll kind of walk through how I stumbled into that. A lot of people always ask, like, how do I get into cybersecurity? And I'm trying to figure out how I got here, because I don't really know myself. I think it's like a series of happy accidents that we end up here. I'm actually trying to get out of cybersecurity because I'm old and I want to retire. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these investigations I did. I had a startup that I tried. It's just an experiment where I wanted to see some of these malware utilities were being built for USB devices. I got really into it when I was working for a particular company, and I got really more into the offensive side of it. It was just so cool. You could plug a flash drive in, and I could infect a network. I mean, forget all this like trying to hack the network and all this sort of thing. If I get inside of a company and I can plug a device in, I can compromise that network. I can steal data. There was a lot of really cool things that could come of it. And then I tried to find a way to actually turn that into sort of a white hat approach as well, and I'll kind of walk through that. I ended up really helping a lot of law enforcement because I would provide them a lot of evidence around various cases. We would be recovering stolen devices, and then what would happen is you'd go in to recover a stolen device and you'd end up unveiling other crimes. And some of them were actually Russian organized crime groups that were operating in Portland, Oregon. There was a period in my life where I was getting really nervous about seeing people in Adidas tracksuits, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So this is what I refer to as my wall of shame. So you'll see that some of the faces are blurred out to protect the guilty. So various tools I built, like for laptops, it would leverage the web camera to take a photo of the person that stole your device. I would get location from Wi-Fi networks. Did similar things with mobile. That was more focused on data protection. I'm going to trip over this, so I'm going to move it. Archiving data, things like that. And then I have a tendency to go down rabbit holes. I think like a lot of people in cybersecurity, you had this conversation. I'm neurodivergent, ADHD, pretty hard. It's good in some ways, bad in others. But when it comes to some of this stuff, the going down rabbit holes, finding new ways of doing discovery of data, things like that, that's kind of what I really started digging deep into it. I did a talk at DEF CON when I presented this a while back. And of course the journalists kind of went crazy with it. The talk was Confessions of a Professional Cyber Stalker, and of course BBC just put my mug on there. I'm a professional cyber stalker. That's always really great, you know, when people are looking you up. And then one of them called me the real life Mr. Robot. If you ever want to get doxxed, like people trying to find out who you are and trying to target you, get headlines like this. But a lot of what I do, it's not, there's some technical aspects to it, but I think a lot of what I've been doing is more creative, trying to find creative solutions to problems that probably people didn't realize existed. And that's kind of where I started talking about every contact leaves a trace. Has anyone ever heard this concept before? Yes, Edmund Lacard. It's called Lacard's exchange principle. Edmund Lacard is sort of the grandfather of forensic science. They called him like the French Sherlock Holmes. A lot of the things that we kind of learn about forensic science, came from him. It's before fingerprints and things like that. But every contact leaves a trace. The idea is that when someone commits a crime, not only do they often take something with them, they leave something behind. And I kept thinking about this when I was reading this book. I was like, this really carries over into the digital world as well. Oftentimes, there's a lot of data, logs, and things like that get generated. And sometimes we just don't know where to look for that data, or maybe we don't know how to collect that data. When I started getting into like EXIF image data, things like that, that's a really good example. There really wasn't a way to search that information. What I found is like in higher-end cameras, they'll actually embed the serial number of the camera and the make and model into the image. There just really wasn't a way to search it, and that's one thing I'll talk about later too, is how I built the search engine and ended up using that to unveil crimes as well. Kind of when I think about this too, I think about the quantify self-pawn, and this is, I've been doing this kind of talk for a while, and this just seems to be getting worse, where we have a lot more information. I think every single crime that's being investigated is going to have a cyber component. You think about surveillance videos, you think about Ring videos, you think about every transaction, everything we have, all the Wi-Fi networks we connect to. There's always going to be a trail of everywhere we go. I think people refer to that as digital exhaust. Sometimes I refer to it as a digital fart because sometimes it's unintentional. But there's just so much data that's out there available to us. If you really want to dox someone, I think the most powerful tool anymore is a credit card. Right? There's all this information that's available from data brokers. You can go into underground forums to get information about individuals. It's not very difficult to really dox people anymore. I think that's why we're seeing a lot of services that'll actually kind of scrub your information from the internet becoming more popular. But still, there's always going to be some sort of a trace. This is kind of how my mind works. You've probably seen these like on like CSI, where they have like all the evidence and the mug shots and things like that, and they're trying to connect the criminals. This really is how my brain works when I'm trying to draw these connections between things. And sometimes, you get frustrated with it, and then you'll take a step back, and then maybe someone in the community will help you. They'll send you some information. I've been doing some OSINT work around this, and that's one thing I really found too, was there's things you can do on your own, but when you start to bring in a community of people that maybe specialize in other areas of security or have a different perspective in how they view it, it really helps. Like sometimes I get stuck with things, and then someone says, well, I found this person, their last name changed or whatever on this date, and then that opens up a whole trove of other information we're able to identify. I like to refer to this, as the hierarchy of data belief. You're probably familiar with this. Your TTPs, Tower of Pain, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But this is where I really see that a lot of the data that we not only do we create ourselves that are generated about us, how it actually gets out there. And what happens is as we interact with things, our control of that data decreases. So there starts with the data we create. If I have a Word document, not connected to the internet, I create it on my laptop, I can delete it, I can reformat the drive. I feel like I have a little bit of control of that bit of data. However, when I maybe upload that to the cloud, now I lose some control of that. Or if I'm interacting and I'm maybe buying a plane ticket, right? There's a lot of information that then gets created for me. But then from that, there's also data that gets created about us. And I'm not sure if you've ever seen when you buy a plane ticket, all of the different systems government systems and all this stuff that this also interacts with like the TSA and all that. One time I was even looking at like a text message on a cell phone. There's like 20 different logs that get generated throughout a mobile carrier when that gets sent. So do you think they're able to delete all of that? Do you think that there's not going to be a trace of it? There's always going to be ways of getting information about that. Then we get into shadow data, and that's data we have a lot less control of. This is data that gets compromised in data breaches. It then gets pushed out into public forums and underground markets and things like that. And that's something we really have no control over at all. That's why I think we get we become complacent with data breaches now. It's just, I guess we just have to deal with it. Our information's out there. Because we really don't have a lot of control over that. There's no regulation around this stuff either. Data brokers, they have to do certain things, but if you go into underground markets, we're talking cryptocurrencies and things like that, there's people you can even hire to go out and get all this information about an individual if you really want to. So kind of how I got started with this, again, I was working for a company. I was primarily a web developer. Then I kind of had to become a one-man web army for a company. I was sort of the server administrator. No one else knew Linux, so I had to learn how to secure a LAMP stack. That's how old I am. I was working at this company, and they had this new technology that they wanted to have to block USB devices from connecting to the network. At that time, there was a lot of infections that were occurring. People were stealing data from using these devices as well. We called it pod slurping. You take an iPod, plug it in, you had this agent, and then you could download all sorts of data from the network. And a lot of times that wasn't being monitored. And so I built this website. When I got really into it, I started playing with some of these tools. I started actually creating my own, modifying them, sort of having a lot of fun with it, doing different things, messing with my friends, sending them flash drives, and putting weird things on their screens. It was fun. But then I was like, I made a website. It was called usbhacks.com, and I started putting these tools up there and explaining, how they work, how administrators can block them. That was the first time the FBI contacted me. They were, what the hell are you doing? You're putting all this malware, you're making it all available. Once I explained my intent, we were pretty cool. And it was actually good to have those connections because I started getting some people reaching out to me that were looking for help with some of these tools. And one in particular was in the Middle East, and it sounded like they actually had physical access to some systems or government systems. And so I forwarded that request off to the FBI, and they say, hey, yeah, thanks, we know who this guy is. We've been watching for him. So see if you can interact with him and talk to him some more. Got a little bit more information from him about what he was trying to do, and then sent it off. So yeah, I guess I'm a little bit of a narc, but when it comes to things like that, I don't want to mess around, right? I always try to stay on the right side of the law. You'll see, especially when I started getting really into some of this technology, it could be misused. It could be used for very malicious things. It could be used for stalking. And so I tried to put a lot of controls in place as much as possible. I was really young and dumb when I was doing some of this stuff, so some of it might be still a little bit irresponsible. And I probably wouldn't be doing this again, today. I don't think I probably could because of permissions and things like that in the operating systems. Because a lot of stuff we were doing was actually taking advantage of vulnerabilities in operating systems and things like that. It took 20 years for Microsoft to finally block auto run on USB. That's just insane. So what I did is I started thinking about how can I turn this into something that's more friendly, right? And not always causing damage and stealing data, but what if I sort of reduce the capabilities to just gather information we would need for threat recovery purposes. I started using it a little bit like in kind of a marketing thing, like someone would open it up and we could see when they opened a file, we'd then see that they opened it. Little things like that. So it would really just kind of control it. And then I built this little tool that people could download, a little agent you just install on your USB device, and then I offered it for free. And it got onto dig.com, which is like old people's Reddit. And it got on the homepage, and the website got dug to death. It crashed. I had over 20,000 people register. But what I also did in the agent is I actually started gathering information around the device that it was getting executed from. That it was sort of a crowdsourcing thing. I was able to see all the different devices that would actually work. So I had old Garmin devices. I had iPads, MP3 players, GPS devices. Yes, back in the day when you had to buy a separate GPS thing and with a suction cup and stick it on your window. Okay. You guys are starting to get an idea how old I am? All right. But it was great. And so then I thought about, what if I turn this into like a company or whatever? Can I do a startup? Because I really kind of enjoyed this sort of work. So we actually started getting some recoveries. The one thing is people would get the name of the person that's logged in. There's a lot of little things here we can identify who it was. So if iPods were getting stolen, like in high schools, we were getting all kinds of hey, thanks, man, you guys got my iPod back. It was great. It was fun. Then I had a really good investigation where it was a professor. He had my agent installed on his flash drive, and he had a dissertation on there, and the flash drive just appeared off of his desk. I had to have a conversation with him about having backups, right? But we were able to get it back for him because first we were just getting connections and it was an ISP. And that's really difficult if you just have an IP address. You have to go to law enforcement. They have to fill out a bunch of paperwork. And one thing I found is, I know you guys are going to find this hard to believe, but law enforcement can be really lazy, right? They don't like to do paperwork. They don't like really to do work at all. So I have to really get enough evidence and information for them to actually make them do anything with it. But then we started getting connections from a university in North Texas. So I reached out to them, their campus security, and we're figuring this out. And come to find out, a year before that, they'd had a bunch of computers stolen out of that lab. So they put a bunch of security controls in. They had a surveillance camera that was just outside of it. You had to have a student ID card to swipe it, right? You're starting to see how this is going to help my investigation. I had a timestamp of when they were connecting that to that computer. We were able to identify the 3 students that were in that lab at that particular time. We had their photos. We had a lot of other information about them. Then we were able to nail it down to the specific computer and the student that was actually logged in. The campus security with the professor went outside one of the students' classes, waiting for him when he came out, and he got the flash drive back. So it was, it's a small little thing, but it was this is where I was actually starting to, connect the dots of these different tools and different pieces of data that a lot of times, you wouldn't know it's available until you start asking, right? If I didn't go talk to campus security, there was no way I would have known that they had access to this data. And then the campus security guard, he was all for it. He was loving this too. He felt like he was on CSI. It was a lot of fun. And then I got a lot of attention in the media, and then I got reached out to by this company called FLIR. They make these high-end thermal imaging cameras. They cost anywhere from $3,000 to $300,000. And they found that my agent worked with their technology, with their cameras, so they wanted to offer it for theft recovery. They also had situations where these cameras are, there's sanctions around them, I guess, or whatever, but you can't sell these to certain countries because they can be used for nuclear purposes. And they had a situation where some of these cameras were ending up in places they shouldn't. And so they wanted to maybe figure out who the distributor was, and they were able to tie IDs to that. So this was it was pretty awesome. This is where I was actually able to quit my day job and start doing this full time. It was a 6-figure deal. Not enough to, to retire, but it was enough to let me start a business and start focusing on this a little bit more. And the one challenge that we had with this, though, was they installed the agent on an SD card, so they didn't have internal memory. So if someone stole it and then they would take it out, put a new SD card in, the agent it's no longer there. So I worked with their software developers, and I'm like, what if we put this in the firmware, and then you guys check to see if the SD card's there. If it's not, you rewrite the agent to it, right? So you can kind of see how I'm taking advantage of a lot of the things that cybercriminals were doing, and using it for hopefully good purposes. And they couldn't tell me that specific cases, but they said that it did help them recover several stolen devices. And they did identify one distributor when I did see that we were getting connections from a place in the Middle East. And they were able to trace that back because we had the distributor ID in the query string that was getting sent, so they knew who was actually selling those devices. So another thing, it's like you start connecting these dots, you dig a little bit deeper into things, and all of a sudden, new crimes get unveiled. So the USB devices were cool and all. Now I had a little bit of money, a little bit of time, so let's look at what I can do maybe with laptops. Like, this is more interesting. At this time, the first iPhone came out, and I was really impressed. Like, it doesn't have a GPS chip, and it can get like positioning from Wi-Fi networks. This is amazing. And I started digging into how I can do that, and like reached out to Skyhook Wireless, which was providing this technology. And so I worked with it, and I was able to get this working on a Mac. So the first product, I think we called a Mac Track. The idea here is that if someone steals your computer, you log into our website, activate tracking, and then every 30 minutes, it'll capture a photo of the person in front of it. It'll get location from Wi-Fi networks, also gathered a bunch of network information, Wi-Fi, whatever I could get, and then we would send that to you. At the time, I didn't want to have to set up a server and have to administer it. You can kind of imagine sort of the privacy implications of this. So I just integrated with Flickr because I had an API. So I don't have to deal with the images and if they get hacked or whatever at that time. So you just signed up for Flickr. You put your Flickr credentials in with a key, and then when you activate tracking, that goes to your Flickr account. And it worked. The first recovery, we had a customer that had it installed on an iMac. His partner was broken into. A bunch of camera stuff was stolen as well. And we started getting this location. And I had to work with the New York police. And the police officer was used to the old way of old technology for recovering stolen devices from Absolute Software. They had like LoJack for laptops. I think they got the name or whatever. But it was really intrusive because it basically provided a backdoor into the computer. And they hired like ex-law enforcement folks, and they're the ones that were working on the investigations. And so there was just, I found it was really sort of invasion of privacy and potentially a vulnerability, so I didn't like their approach. It's also a lot of paperwork that has to fill out because they're relying primarily on IP address. And so you have to, again, the police have to fill out a lot of paperwork. And this detective or police officer in this case, he didn't want to do that either. He was really mad. When he calls me, he's like, oh, God, now I have to do all this work. And I'm like, no, this is different. Like, this gets you within 20 meters of where that laptop really is. Like, it's not just an IP address. You don't really need to do all that paperwork. Just print the photo of this guy out, go to the location, ask around. And he's like, yeah, don't tell me how to do my job. I was like, okay, but he did it. And then they found out it was this guy. He owned a tattoo shop, and this is the back office. And so what he was actually doing was fencing stolen property. So not only did we recover the laptop for the customer and their cameras, we also found like 4 other laptops. We found, you can see in the background, there's a bunch of musical gear and things like that. So he had quite a business going on back here with fencing stolen property. And now that detective, then he wanted to be my best friend because he got a bunch of pats on the back or whatever. He wanted to go to a baseball game, so it's kind of cool. And then we had some more. There was a group of that was targeting schools in Portland, and I work with the Portland School District. I'm like, let's have some fun here. What happened was they would get a bunch of laptops stolen, and then they would replace them, and then 2 weeks later they get stolen again. These guys are really brazen. I think there was actually someone on the inside that was helping them with when to do it, and So we put out some bait laptops with my software on it. We didn't even put it in the locked cabinets. And then sure enough, within a few weeks, those were stolen. So then we started getting connections in Vancouver, which is across from Portland. And so we got the location. I provided this to the police, and they went. And the detective working on the case, he knocks on this door, and the person that opened it was a guy that works on his roof. So he knew him, and then he got all mad at me, like, you're wasting my time. And then I said, I told you it's within 20 to 30 meters, and then he's like, whatever, and like, you were never going to do anything. So again, I am very persistent. I drove out there, and I had my Alpha Wi-Fi antenna sticking out of my car across the street. I'm trying to verify that the information that we collected was right, and it was. And one thing with this was that the Wi-Fi network, it was like something about Russian pride. And then I looked over, and it's next to the house that the guy, the roofing guy was. It's like a duplex, and then right next to it is this other house, and there's a car, and there's a girl washing the car, and the bumper sticker has this big Russian flag pride thing on it. And then I'm sitting there, and then the guy, actually the photo here, he walks out, and I'm like, that's him. And then they're like looking at me, so I'm looking like I'm like an idiot on my laptop, like I'm looking for directions or something. But then I called the detective, and then they came out, and then they had like a couple of them that came with them, and they dug into it. And then they ended up unveiling this was another organized crime group, a Russian group. They had about, there's 6 or 7 people that ended up getting arrested. They even recovered a stolen car, I think, in this case. And then even said, like, that guy, that's kind of his first offense, but, the guy across the street from him, who is his friend, who also is helping with him, and he's really bad news. Oh, you mean the guy that my car was parked right in front of his house? Thanks, guys. Yeah, he had just gotten out of jail for, like, manslaughter or something like that, so, yeah, great times. And then we had another one. There was a relationship between a group that was in Portland and Missouri. There's these sort of these syndicates, I guess you could say. And what happened was we had one laptop stolen, and then I wasn't getting any connections for several weeks. I'm like, great. They probably ripped or reformatted the hard drive, ripped it out, or something like that, or sold it for parts. But then we started getting connections from this fellow named Victor. And Victor was really great. He helped me out a lot because he changed the username to his full name. That was really awesome. But this is where I started getting more into the OSINT side, because this was just a really interesting case. I kept seeing all these connections. Like, I saw him doing some weird stuff in a hotel room. There was all these other things that he was doing. And then I dug into him, and he was like a power seller on eBay selling car parts. So you can kind of get an idea of what his job was, right? Stealing stolen stuff, or selling stolen property. He was really into cars and Scion, so I found that he was like on these forums. And that was really helpful too, because he posted a photo of his car with his license plate. That was great. So I had all this information, and this was great because the district attorney in that case, we had so much evidence to them. They said, even if he doesn't have the laptop, we'll get him for possession of stolen property. So what happened was they got it back. He actually sold the laptop and a stolen bike to his friend Omar. That's there when he got it. But we were able to get it back. And so what happened was it was his father that was involved in this. His father was like, in this group of people, they would get like U-Haul vans of full stolen property. They would then drive it to Missouri or somewhere halfway, and then they would exchange stolen property, because the first thing you do when your laptop or whatever gets stolen is you're going to look on your local Craigslist. So this is how they were trying to get around that. And it was his father, and his father gave them the stolen laptop for his birthday. So that's really nice. Thanks for the criminal record, Dad. Then we had a bunch more. There was a really interesting one, too, we had in Brazil. There was a carjacking. There was a veterinary student. You can see him here. He was with his friend, and they're in the car, and these guys held him at gunpoint, like pulled him out, like beat the crap out of his friend, the driver, like really bad. And then they took off in the car. And then we started getting pings. We started identifying who they were. The Brazil police like this a lot. Usually they wouldn't do a lot with this, but there was a number of, there was like 6 or 7 cases with this one that they were doing this to. So this is great too, is like, not only did we recover a laptop, but we also were able to find a violent criminal and bring them to justice as well. So you never know what you're going to get. And then I started getting more into mobile, but I found with mobile is that people don't really care too much about the value of the device like you would a laptop. What they cared about was the data. And so I built sort of a mechanism too, so you could, it would save your contacts and your images and things like that. And it would do it in a way that, like, even if I go into this server, I can't access your photos. You would set an encryption key on the app, it would encrypt the data in blobs, and then it would upload it to the server. Again, because I don't want the liability if someone hacks into the network or my server, and then all of my customers' images are compromised. Or also if police come to me and they say, hey, we need all this person's contacts or whatever, I'm like, okay, here's this encrypted blob. You have to go talk to the customer to get the key, right? So I like that approach. So we actually ended up having a really interesting recovery. So there's a video, and then hopefully the audio works, but you guys don't have to hear my voice for a minute.
That's helping track them down. News Channel 8's Ed Teachout spent the past 2 days with police and investigators on the trail of swiped cell phones. He's live outside the Washington Square Mall where the theft took place. Ed.
Well, the managers of the Sprint store here at the Washington Square Mall behind me say they're very confident that tracking software developed only miles away from here and put onto their demo phones will lead to an arrest.
This is a $500 phone. This ends up being a $450 phone.
2 empty display cradles are all that remains after someone stole 2 demo cell phones from the Sprint store at Washington Square Mall on Saturday. Moments after surveillance video caught the theft on tape, employees initiated tracking software installed on the stolen phones.
We were able to not only find the GPS location of the individuals that took them, but also we've been able to monitor any activity that happens in the phone.
That activity turned out to be pictures someone took shortly after the phones were stolen. Tigard police admit it's a brave new world when pictures taken on cell phones can be told to send back pictures once they're stolen.
And that has not only piqued the interest of our investigators, but in essence appears at this point could be very credible information for us to follow up on.
The Portland creator of the software tracking the theft says police are on the right track.
If they're not the thieves, they definitely know who stole it.
And if you look over the head of this man, you'll see in the window an Oregon temporary permit. Philip, this is Ed. With the help of a gadget track investigator on the phone, we tracked the stolen phone signal to this Vancouver apartment complex. There we found the exact temporary permit and a young woman who told us off camera a man she called Peter had sent this photo to her Saturday evening, but says she knew nothing about the phones.
Hi, my name is Ed.
We tracked the second cell phone signal to this duplex about 8 blocks away.
You don't have a Samsung Epic phone in this location?
No. Police were here yesterday looking for it.
We're back live now outside the Washington Square Mall where we've just obtained within the hour those DMV records on that temporary permit. Tigard police say they hope the men in the pictures will contact them soon so they can explain how their faces ended up on a stolen cell phone. Back to you.
That's helping track them down. News Channel 8's Ed Teachout spent the past 2
Yeah, so I had a deal with a bunch of Sprint stores, so they actually had the tracking software installed on a bunch of laptops or mobile devices. That's how I was able to get that. That startup, it ended up failing. I got to a point where I got totally burned out. I did get some funding and things, and I kind of learned I'm a better investigator and cybersecurity person than I am a startup founder. Not really my thing. But one thing too, with these the software is that you install that consciously. You install it on devices you own. You can actually see it in the phone itself. So if someone installed this phone or the app on someone's phone to stalk them or whatever, it would be present there, and they would be able to see that who installed it. What really ticks me off is this sort of commercial spyware. You've heard of the NSO group, and what they're doing is, leveraging zero-day exploits to target individuals. Originally it was supposed to be, just criminals, but what happened was they didn't have a lot of control over who was actually deploying this, and so they were selling it to authoritarian states. Journalists were targeted, dissidents were targeted. You probably remember the whole Khashoggi incident. Some of the people that were around him that were found to actually have Pegasus spyware installed on their devices. So this kind of thing, I have a real issue with NSO group and a lot of the commercial spyware stuff that's happening. I'm glad that Apple's suing them as well as Facebook. So hopefully we can see more of that just to kind of tighten this up a bit. But one thing with this investigation too I had was the phones, some of those phones, the GPS coordinates weren't very accurate when we were getting it when we were doing the API polls. So what we actually got better information from was the photos they were taking. Those had better GPS coordinates. And that's when I started digging more into EXIF data. I even built a tool that you could upload a photo and then it would look for like GPS coordinates. I also found that all the high-end cameras, most of the high-end cameras embed the make, model, and serial number of the camera into the image itself. There just really wasn't a way to search for it. And I was like, if there's a way I could build a database around that, you could type in the serial number of your camera, and then we can show you all of the photos that were taken, we can find online that were taken by that. We could possibly identify stolen cameras, right? So that was another tool that I built. What I did was I was able to mine all Flickr. I had a script that was doing it. But there was like over 4 billion images in Flickr, and I was kind of going through each one, and it downloads the image, extracts the EXIF data, and then puts it into a database. There was no way I was going to be able to do that. You know, it'd probably take me years to accomplish. At that time, I had a friend that had a startup, and they were doing sort of like a SETI at home kind of thing, where you could sell your computer's idle time. So they were sold this. They were doing it with a bunch of universities, so they would get money back, for their idle time. So I had access to like over 500 computers. So I just set this up. I distributed this script out to these 500 computers, and then they all mined Flickr. We also mined other photo sharing sites like 500, Panorama, TwitPic. One thing with Twitter I found is that they would scrub EXIF data from images you upload, but I was finding all kinds of interesting things in profile photos, even GPS coordinates. So you could go in and even you have this tiny little thumbnail, there's like GPS coordinates and a bunch of other valuable information. So I also stored that. So you would do a search and then you would be able to find the camera. And it actually worked. This is John Heller. He was on assignment for Getty Images at the Egyptian Theater. He had like, I think it's $9,000 worth of equipment or something like that. Yeah, it was $9K. And he turned around to talk to someone, and he turned back, and his camera bag was gone. And so he heard about the service because I kind of put it out there. It was on The Economist magazine or something. And he did a search. This is a year after his camera was stolen for his camera. Put the serial number in, and he got a hit. We then saw that was mapped to Flickr, and then he saw the username, and he was able to see that that's also another professional photographer, and he found his Facebook profile, and then that photographer took photo of his camera gear at one point in a hotel room, and he goes, "That's my camera." He contacted the LAPD, and they were able to get that back. They backtracked this whole thing. What happened was, the guy stole it. He sold it on Craigslist, theft list. So I'm going to start calling it. And then that person sold it on eBay, and then that's how they were able to get it back. So they kind of went back. The guy got his money back from the eBay seller. The police went to the address that he picked this camera up before. It was an apartment. This is a year later, and they go in there and they find all sorts of stolen property, and they were able to bust these guys. So it's just interesting to me is like just that little piece. Like no one thought about like creating a search engine, but a little piece of data, the serial number of a camera, a year later actually allows us to go back and solve crimes that occurred a year later, or a year before. I had a number of these cases. There was another one where a guy had a camera stolen. This guy brought him out to his garage to show it to him. The guy punched him in the face, grabbed the camera, took off. His friend was waiting in the car. This was really interesting. I found there was this guy, he advertised himself as a professional photographer for models and a DJ, and I was looking at all of his images, and he had like new high-end cameras like every 30 days. It was all these different ones. And I started digging more into him and what photos he was posting. And so one thing I don't recommend is taking photos of yourself speeding like over 100 miles an hour on the freeway while smoking weed, and then uploading that to a public repository. We had GPS coordinates, timestamps, all that stuff. I was able to get this information to law enforcement. Oh yeah, he also had an unlicensed firearm. He had a criminal record as well, so he shouldn't have been in possession with that. So again, if you're like a felon and you're not allowed to have guns, don't take a photo of yourself with a gun to your head. But the police wouldn't help me with this one. This is a case where they just didn't want to get involved. Again, sometimes, most of the times, law enforcement's pretty lazy. I was reached out to by a group, the Child Exploitation Unit of ICE. These folks do really amazing stuff. At that time, they were doing this project where they would have people take photos of hotel rooms that they're at, because they would, different cities, like a Holiday Inn, they would use a particular bedspread or pattern on the curtains, right? So the idea is if someone took a photo, they can identify where that is, because a lot of times what happens is these people, these sick people will take photos of a kid that they're about to do something to, and then they post it on these forums, and so that gives them an opportunity to catch them and maybe identify where they're at before they hurt these children. And so they reached out to me, and I said, heck yeah, you guys, here's an API, free. Just, yes, get these assholes, go for it. They can't tell me if it was used for anything, just kind of the nature of it, but they said it was really helpful in some of their investigations. So I thought that was kind of cool. After I presented it at DEF CON, I was approached by some producers. They have a show called Crime Watch Daily. And so they wanted to do a setup. They were hearing a lot about smart homes. And one of the producers just got this really fancy smart house. And they gave us a challenge. We want you to hack the smart home. What we're going to do is we're going to give you 24 hours, and you're going to hack the smart home. And then we're going to have a party that night. And then we want you to mess with the guests. And I was like, and I'm going to get paid for this? So here's what we did.
Vicki Johnson's new beachfront house is not only spectacular, it's smart. She can control most everything from her phone or tablet.
It's pretty smart. The drapes go up and down automatically. We can close doors. We can flush toilets. We can turn lights on and off. We can turn the air conditioning on and off. TVs, music. It's a brilliant house. We were told it was hack-proof.
We'll see about that.
They think they're coming to take a tour of a smart house.
But what we're really doing is hacking her house during the party and potentially the devices of every guest who walks through the front door. Helping me are two cybersecurity experts, Craig Young and Ken Westin.
So first we need to break into the Wi-Fi.
Vicki has 28 devices connected to the home's wireless internet. Once they were into the Wi-Fi system, our hackers were quickly able to commandeer the home's cameras.
These are the security cameras to the house that you've hacked into.
Exactly. Here we actually can see this is actually our car out here. This is the front door. If you don't secure them properly, then they become insecurity cameras.
First, we turn off the lights. Then, with control of the security cameras, we divert the video signal and play it on the TV in the living room. With everyone's attention on the TV, the hackers talk to the guests.
We have taken control of this house, the lights, the security cameras.
Now a special message from me in the car is piped in. I'm Anna Garcia from Crime Watch Daily, and this house has just been hacked.
It was free or cheap for the people that are actually implementing the installation, but that poses a lot of security risks, as you can imagine.
Vicki Johnson's new beachfront house is not...
Yeah, so the funny thing with that is that we were able to get in. We used a cloud cracking service for the Wi-Fi, and then we get this it was a number, and I'm like, that looks like a phone number. And so I Googled the phone number, and it was the owner of the house. He's a real estate agent, a pretty heavy hitter, and he has a cell phone number right there on his website. I could have saved $200 if I just done a little bit of OSINT, right? Yeah, the interesting thing was, so once we got in, we then used a Wi-Fi Pineapple, and then got all these devices to connect to it, and then it was just simple because everything was set to the default password. So all we had to look at was from the MAC address, we could identify the manufacturer, and so that's how I was able to get into the camera. I even, they had a thing that actually connected to a toilet. It was a cleaning mechanism, so you can set, like when you have a party, it'll automatically clean it. And so I found a way to do that, so I kept flushing the toilet too. They didn't show that. When people walked in, there was a security camera. I was actually capturing photos of every person that came in. So then I could have created a profile of each of those individuals as well. They didn't show all that, but yeah, this was kind of fun. Stunt hacking, but. And I was doing another investigation I was helping with, and I ended up kind of stumbling onto this thing where I actually found a bunch of emails were being indexed by Google. And basically what happened was Telmex acquired this Prodigy or whatever, and they had a misconfiguration. And so basically I had access to pretty much all of their emails. I could go in and see all of them. I did responsible disclosure, told Google, reached out to Telmex to tell them about this. It got featured in El Economista magazine. It was going to be in a big national newspaper story as well, but I'm not sure if you guys know who Carlos Slim is. He's really a rich dude, really powerful. He heard about this and he was able to put the kibosh on that. Yeah, I was a little nervous about going to Mexico for a little while. I also did a bunch of research. I was really interested when I was working at Tripwire, digging into like stolen credit cards and that market. So I started experimenting, getting into some of the underground forums, and I found that there was some interesting forums around insider trading. So looking for insider information. So this is sort of a new way for hackers to make money. If I'm able to get information about like earnings reports, a patent, or anything like that before everyone else, and then I can make trades based on that information, you can make a lot of money. And there was a group that did. There was a guy. He was actually the VP of Morgan Stanley at one point, and then he became a minister. And I found that it's DOJ, they did this whole thing and they unveiled it because the hackers, they were logging into like PR firm servers. They were able to get news press releases. In the first one, there was no logging in the SIM in their website, so there was no evidence of this. They were able to figure this out after they got caught. What ended up them getting busted is one of the hackers that were involved in this. He was involved in stolen credit cards and things like that, and the police went in to bust him, and they recovered the stolen laptop. And the problem is they had PowerPoint presentations around how to use this system with videos and all this stuff for these traders. There was a group of traders, it was the Debo group, I think was they're called, and they had all these different accounts. They even had a bunch of shell accounts, the companies and things like that. They made over $30 million. Doing this. And I thought, I did this presentation because I go, this is going to be more and more, this is becoming much more lucrative. And then recently there was an FSB agent that was found that he was making these types of trades similarly, and him and his group made over $80 million. So you think about all those, when a ransomware thing occurs, when you have data exfiltration, right? Just consider that data to be compromised, and that's where they were getting some of this data. They're actually selling that stuff on the black market, or they're setting up systems themselves to do it. So how they got caught, again, like stupid things like that, but they also, sometimes they forgot to log into their VPN and their real IP got unveiled. PR firm 2, they had an IP address that mapped to, these guys even set up trading accounts for these guys, and that's how they were paying them. And then the IPs matched, and that's another piece of evidence that allowed them to get busted. So, I mean, kind of in summary, too, it's just, I want to kind of talk about the hierarchy of data bleed. A lot of the things I was able to do, particularly on OSINT, there's a lot of information that's out there that's available. And I don't think it's really not technical. I mean, there's technical tools and things like that, but I think there's a creative element to things when you're doing these types of investigations. And I don't think creativity is something we talk enough about in our world. It's always everything's, oh, you're a techie, and things like that. But we're very creative. I find that everyone in cybersecurity, that we don't just do techie things. We are creators, and we have a different way of approaching things. And I think that's why I think we're a lot of people who are neurodivergent, such as myself. We thrive in this environment, not only because we can think differently and we can solve these types of really hard problems, but I think we also have a really good community. We all hang out together. I think now I go to DEF CON, I don't even go to sessions anymore. I just hang in a circle bar and drink. But I think that's one of the best things. So I think that's one thing I really appreciate about the community is our community. And I'll be here for another couple days. I'll be here today too for the session. So if I think I have some time here for some questions. We have about 15 minutes. So if anyone has any questions, yeah. I used Delete Me recently. I was really impressed with how well it did. I still had to do some of it myself. Yeah, you kind of give them power of attorney, and then they go out there. It kind of sucks. You have to have a subscription to have your data removed from the internet. I wish we had more policies like in Europe and things like that, right, to be forgotten and all that stuff. But I think they work okay. I wouldn't like rely on it 100%, but as long as you can make it a little bit more difficult. Just some of the stuff I've been helping with, some other OSINT things I've been helping with, unveil people around like the spyware, like disinformation, things like that. Being able to apply some of my OSINT skills. Again, then I have a group of people now who are helping me do that. But that's why I might become a target. So that's why I started taking my own personal security. I was pretty lazy about it before, and it's not until you start doing try to dox yourself, you realize like, oh my God, I still have this account. This is like 10 years old. I got to delete this. Yeah. Yeah.
Oddly enough, and I'm probably mispronouncing the name, right next door, Yale Brower has a huge list of data brokers that you can unsubscribe to.
Awesome.
So you go look her up on Mastodon.
Awesome.
She publishes the list like every month.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, yeah, so for Gadget Track, if you had a Faraday cage, yeah, it wouldn't work. Yeah, I mean the stuff I was doing was more like it was kind of fun. It was like consumer. A lot of times you just kind of get lucky, right? A lot of this stuff, but it wasn't really used by government. There was a situation where I did have some government agency come to me and they wanted to utilize this technology. Kind of scared me because they can actually black box your company and take your technology and you can't sell it, things like that. And the ways that they wanted to use it, I had some ethical issues with it. Again, tracking people that aren't aware of it, things like that. So I had a little bit of issues with that. So I tried to put up some barriers. Oh, it's not going to work for that, things like that. But yeah, there's all sorts of ways you can get around some of this technology, right? Faraday cages, rip the hard drives out, things like that, or don't steal them at all. Yeah. Yeah, for those phones. Well, I think it still comes from the GPS, but it was like when I make a request for the GPS coordinates, that was different. I think it's when you take the photo, I think it actually gave the location service a little bit more time to get the location. So we were getting GPS coordinates, but it was like kind of like in a weird, it was all over the place. But I think when they took the photo, then it does a better job of, okay, let's get the real location, and then it would embed that in the image itself. Good question. Yeah. In the EXIF, yeah. Yeah, the question was, does it embed the data in the image itself, or is it the EXIF data? It's all EXIF data, yeah. Yeah.
When you have those evidence packages, what were some of the best or most successful techniques you had to get law enforcement to action on?
I kind of became, I do a lot of PR stuff now, so like that's one thing that I found is that when I was having difficulty with the phone service, getting law enforcement pay attention, the Tiger Police, but when I got KGW involved and they had a story on it, like now all of a sudden you have the public's eye on a particular case, that seems to get them a little bit more motivated. Yeah.
When you're doing the hack the house thing, how much prep work did you guys have before?
It was about 12 hours. They said they were going to give us 24 hours, but it was about 12 hours. But it wasn't that hard. I mean, the first thing, once we got into the Wi-Fi network, we cracked that like that. Then everything just was easy. It was easier than we thought. Like if they changed the passwords or something like that, then it would have been harder. We probably wouldn't get into all the systems. But whoever did the implementation was incredibly lazy with it. Like I even found like some of the services were routing through China and things like that. Like, do you guys realize your surveillance camera footage is actually being wired through China and then back here? Like they were kind of shocked by that. It was like about a day, and then after that we got invited to the party, so we got to drink with. They had some really nice wine, and we got. One thing we did too, we got invited. Like the homeowner brought us into his home theater because when we did the audio stuff, we screwed up their whole audio system, so we had to fix all that, and we had to make sure they were secure before we left. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So like going back 2 questions ago, when you're tracking, a piece of, consumer product or whatever, changing hands multiple times, how do you convince the law enforcement that that specific serial number actually belongs to?
Yeah, that's why we hand the information to, like, I try not to get involved directly in investigations or anything like that, but you give as much information to law enforcement as possible. One of the guys that was, that had bought the stolen camera, he had to hire a lawyer because they were going to go after him first. But they did see that the serial numbers matched and they had a record of it. And so, yeah, he wasn't too happy about that. He was also out the money for the camera and things like that. But yeah, when it came to that, I would always say law enforcement. Like, I've had situations too recently where people come to me, they think they're being stalked and things like that, and they'll have conversations with them. And some of them I start to realize, like, this might be a mental health issue. This is not something I can really help with. I have to find ways of getting out of that situation. I'll even say, like, if you really think this is the case, you really should talk to law enforcement or FBI. This is beyond, like, my capabilities. And then sometimes people will even ask me, can you hack a Twitter account and things like that? And I'm like, yeah, sure, but can you go rob a bank for me first? And then we'll talk, right? Yeah, because we had our software installed on it, so we have IDs and things like that. So if we have they're going to keep doing it again, and that's usually how they end up getting caught. So you usually are waiting for them to do something stupid or make a mistake, and usually they do. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'll be around all day, so if you guys have any questions, I'll be here. But thanks so much for having me.